Today on Inner Light, we welcome Craig Meriwether, certified clinical hypnotherapist, medical hypnosis specialist, and founder of Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. Craig has guided thousands through trauma release, pain management, and transformation. But his deepest passion lies in the spiritual dimension of hypnotherapy. Through Sacred Mystery Hypnotherapy and his Past Lives Guidebook, he explores how past life regression and soul memory can open pathways to profound healing and higher guidance. Welcome to the show, Craig. It's such an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you. I've been looking forward to talking with you for a while, so I'm excited to get going.
It's a pleasure. Craig, what inspired you to move from clinical hypnotherapy into the spiritual side, like past lives and soul journeys?
Yeah, a great question. It's sort of the reason I got into hypnotherapy. One, I saw the healing potential in my own life through hypnotherapy. I'd been struggling with some depression and anxiety since I was a teenager, and after many years, I mean, this is 1980s. And so I spent a lot of time looking for ways to help. And one of the things in terms of the books I was reading, and by the early 2000s, of course, the internet's out there and you can research a little bit more. And what I found was hypnotherapy was such a wonderful technique that other people were using to help themselves that I started using it myself. And I found great relief from the issues I was dealing with. But there is also this aspect of hypnotherapy, the more esoteric, the more mystical side of it. And not that it's hypnotherapy, that's the mystical tool. It's just a way to guide your own higher consciousness, your own higher self into these states of whether it's healing or you're looking for insights or past lives to discover. And spirituality has always been very important to me in my life. I grew up in a very religious background, which in and of itself, we could have a super long discussion between, about religion versus spirituality. But I grew up in a very religious background. It was just a side of being human that was always interesting to me, spirituality. And as I was using hypnotherapy in ways to help me relieve my issues around anxiety and depression, I also found that you can use it to have deeper aspects of a spiritual experience. And so what actually drew me to being a hypnotherapist was the more spiritual side, was the past life regression and connecting with guides or doing the ancestral healing work. And so that the school I went to, the Hypnotherapy Academy of America, the reason I chose that school, one was just for its extraordinary training and its extensive training, 2.5 months, 500 hours. This isn't some, weekend video course that you take. This is like a real school, or is a real school. You can still go to it. But what attracted me to this school, again, someplace you have to actually go to and study there with other students and, of course, the teachers. But was the last 2 weeks of the 2.5 months, module 5, is past life regression. And the reason I chose that school was because of its training in that side of things. And so what I found fascinating about their education is that they build up to past life regression. So they want you to have this foundation of clinical hypnotherapy, dealing with trauma and anxiety and issues around confidence and bad habits like maybe smoking and things like that. So the more kind of traditional ways you will use hypnotherapy and accessing your subconscious mind for change and transformation. That's the core training, the foundational training that you get first. That's the first 6 weeks. Then you'll study medical hypnosis, pain control, healing acceleration, that kind of thing, helping people if they're struggling with cancer, that kind of thing. Then on top of all that foundation of clinical and medical hypnosis, then you study the more esoteric and mystical side of consciousness. And the reason I kind of first started on the more clinical side, and I started Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy, although nowadays through Zoom, and I do mostly virtual sessions with people around the United States and around the world. I was studying, or not studying, but I was working with people in a more clinical way because I live right next to Sedona. I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is about 40 minutes east of Sedona, Arizona, which is a very spiritual uh, uh, sanctuary for people, not only for travelers, but for people to live. And a lot of that work was being done there. And I just felt it was kind of being done. And I didn't have a leg up in terms of how am I going to differentiate myself from this huge. It's sort of like having a flashlight next to a big stadium filled with lights. You know, it's just like, well, how am I going to stand out and make myself known? So I thought, since the clinical side wasn't being offered as much, I could kind of make my way in this field doing clinical hypnotherapy, although I would still do past life regressions and things and do that kind of healing work. But it was just kind of, in the last few years, it's really the the eagerness to really focus on that work, with my own spiritual journey, the eagerness to kind of focus on that work. And I got excited about writing this book, Past Lives Guidebook. And I wanted to pivot more towards the work that really, calls to me. And because of the issues around when the world went through, the pandemic of about five years ago, access to other areas of the country and the world is so much easier, and people like doing virtual sessions, online sessions, because it's so convenient. You feel comfortable and relaxed in your own homes. And again, it's not like I'm doing anything to anybody. This isn't a massage. This isn't Reiki. This isn't some other type of therapy where I'm specifically doing the healing for the person. You're going to heal yourself. You're going to have this experience on your own. Again, this isn't me being a psychic or a medium or anything like that. So I'm not telling you what your past life is, or having you, or, telling you what your guide is like, your spirit guide. You're going to experience it yourself, which I find so much more powerful, when you have your own experience around your past lives for your own discovery and your own integration into this current life, and as well as the healing. And so this kind of all allowed me the ability to do virtual sessions to open up more to the spiritual side of things. And I had started doing more and more of that kind of work. And I just decided as I'm getting on in life, I really want to lean in more to this kind of thing, because it brings me so much joy to work with people in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And do you find clients come more out of curiosity or from a deep need for healing?
Well, that's a really interesting question. It seems to be maybe half and half. I know that's kind of not a little bit of a non-answer, but I think a lot of people come to this through curiosity, of course, but they read the books, like whether it's Brian Weiss or Michael Newton or Dolores Cannon or some of the other authors, and they're curious. But in the same way, they also feel, yeah, I've had this anxiety, I've had this anger for so many years. I've done the talk therapy, I've done these other modalities of therapy, maybe even going to doctors because they have some physical pain, and nothing seems to help. They've done years and years and years of talk therapy, talking about their problems, and yet they still feel this anxiety, still feel this maybe a fear around, let's say, deep water, deep ocean water, even though they live in the mountains and have never seen the ocean, something like that. And they can't get over or around it. And maybe they read a book, or they hear a lecture, see a video on YouTube, and the intuition kind of prickles up. It's like, oh, maybe the curiosity comes out there. Yeah, maybe it is a past life regression. So I think a lot of people, yeah, they just are more interested in discovering past lives, or more interested in the insights they can gain from that, because maybe they've read some books, or they've seen a documentary or something like that. Maybe a friend had an experience. But also there's a lot of people who, and what's interesting about your question is that it never seems to be the first therapy that people will go for. We're sort of the kind of, whether it's hypnotherapy or specifically past life regression, we're sort of last on the list. So most often people will have done many, many years of other types of therapy and not have found the results. And sort of this is the kind of last hope that, well, I guess I've done everything else. I'll try hypnotherapy, or, I read Brian Weiss' book, or I saw this lecture on YouTube, somebody speaking about it, about reincarnation. And I think this might help me. And then they'll start investigating that side of it. So I think, it's an interesting question. Again, I know I said that, but there's certainly a curiosity, a hopefulness, because they've tried everything else, and maybe this will be the answer for them. And, again, whether it's a wanting just to discover more about themselves, to grow spiritually, to grow uh, as a human, but as a soul as well, but also that healing they're looking for. So again, it's kind of half and half. They feel that calling, that intuition, which I always think is the subconscious mind tapping you on the shoulder. When you have that intuition, you have that nudge. The Brian Weiss books have been around since the late 80s. And so now they're just discovering it. It's like all these coincidences and synchronicities start to fall into place. So I think when you're ready for it, it appears in front of you. And when you're open to it, as of course, if you're making that phone call, or you're sending that email, asking for more information, it's like, well, then of course you're open to it, and you'll have a wonderful experience. And probably, if this is what you're looking for, you're gonna have a very healing experience as well.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Like, it shows how often healing is sparked by deeper longing to understand who we truly are.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's certainly not a new thing. People have been, since the earliest of times, watching the stars move across the sky, looking for deeper meaning in our existence. And what I find fascinating in this time is we know so much more. We've had so many experiences, and there's so much even research around these experiences. And that's what a lot of my books about, Past Lives Guidebook, about the research, about the science, about memory and consciousness and what is happening in the brain, and all the even research around things like remote viewing and remembering past lives and the experiences of other people that have been researched. It's fascinating to be in this time and be able to, look at it in a more scientific way and say, yeah, there's some real evidence that this is how it works. Yes. Fascinating time to be alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And your work bridges science, case studies, and mystical insights. How do you explain past life regression to someone who approaches it with skepticism?
Yeah. Yeah, another good question. And I get it. In fact, I write about this in the introduction of the book. I'm a true believer and a skeptic at the same time. There are various sections of the New Age bookstore, if you will, that I just kind of like, I don't know about that part. And because I still have that skepticism, maybe it was just the way I was raised, the way I was the family, the schooling I had brought it into me. And so I think that was a big part of the book, was wanting to investigate more about this. And in terms of skepticism, yeah, I get it. I understand why somebody would be skeptical about this, especially if you grew up in a religious system or educational system that does not focus or even acknowledge the possibility of past life regression, past lives or reincarnation, that aspect of being a soul. But what's fascinating to me is, because of all the research that has gone on, what I find fascinating is that people will have a worldview or a universal view of what happens. Well, you just live this one life and that's it. And you get to the last day of your life and then lights out and that's it. And yet they can provide no evidence for that worldview. It's just what they believe. It's just their opinion. And yet when they kind of scoff at past lives or reincarnation, and yet, well, I can offer all this proof. The stories alone, the anecdotal evidence of children, if not teenagers and adults, remembering past lives that were then verified. Yeah, certainly there are scams out there, but there has been enough evidence to suggest that this is a real possibility. Now, in terms of what you're saying, the skepticism, in terms of just going through a past life regression, it's nothing too different than how we live our existence right now. And part of that experience of being human is remembering things. So I can ask somebody, what did you have for lunch yesterday? Or do you remember going out with your friend to that restaurant, or to see the music, or to go to the movies, or remember when you went to work last week and you had that meeting? Even further on of, okay, remember that vacation you took a couple years ago? Do you remember something that happened back in high school, good, bad, or indifferent? How about being a little kid? What's the earliest memory you can conjure up in your mind of being a kid? Can you remember the house you grew up in, or the kitchen, you had, made breakfast in when you were a kid? These are memories, and it's not that you're living that memory. It's not like you're back there in high school. You're back there on that vacation, but you can remember it. Maybe, let's say you took a vacation to the beach and you can smell the ocean. You can hear the gentle lapping of the waves onto the shore. You can hear the seagulls. Maybe there's seals, or you can see dolphins jumping. You have all these experiences, and even though you're not there, you maybe even can remember even the smells and the sounds, and the warm breeze on your skin. You can reactivate your five senses through memory. Well, that's exactly what past life regression is. It's just we're taking it a little step further. We're going a little bit deeper. And in terms of accessing memories, if you can remember all the way back to maybe being a kid, why wouldn't you be able to remember further? Why wouldn't you be able to do that? There's some research that shows that memory and consciousness is not held within the brain, but the brain is more of an antenna, specifically the pineal gland. That's a whole, other conversation. I mean, again, about the book I wrote, there's lots and lots of research and discussion of the brain and the pineal gland, this research about that. And so if you're using your brain as an antenna to pull memory from somewhere else, then why wouldn't you be able to go back even further? Sort of like being in a swimming pool. And most of the time we're just swimming in the shallow end, and we remember last week, or remember the vacation 2 years ago, or remember high school, or being a little kid. Well, all we're going to do is go over to the deep end. It's the same swimming pool, but all we're going to do is swim over to the deep end and have a bigger experience. Now, in terms of, being skeptical about it, yes, there is some possibilities that maybe it's just a subconscious mind creating a metaphor, creating a allegory, creating a story around healing. And if that's the case, and if that's some people's case, I mean, maybe, it's 50-50, maybe it's 60-40, maybe 70-30, maybe 30% of the time is the subconscious mind creating this metaphor, this allegory, this story to create the healing. And it's like, well, okay, well, really what it's about is the healing then. And I can't prove one way or the other that when somebody has an experience, it's a absolutely real past life. Some people get things they can verify, places they've never been to, but then can verify through doing some research that it's accurate. But a lot of times it's not that specific. And it's really, again, about the healing or some discoveries you need to make about your purpose in this current life. Again, while I can't maybe prove at the end of the day one way or the other where it's an actual past life, or it's just a construct of the subconscious mind to create that healing or to propel you forward on your purpose, the intention, therefore, needs to be about the healing and the discoveries you need to make to create your best life. But again, in terms of, proving one way or another, nobody can prove anything. Even if you believe, well, I don't believe in past life regression. I just think we have this one life, and then we get to the end of this life and it's lights out and that's all there is. It's like, well, you can't prove that either. There's more evidence, scientific evidence and biological evidence, that past lives do exist, reincarnation does exist, than it does not. And so I would say to a skeptic, I wonder where, maybe have a nice kind of fun conversation about it, and ask them where they get their beliefs from, and then, maybe go through some stories. It's like, well, how is it possible that this child had this experience of a past life or seems to be reincarnated of somebody else, and that's they've verified it. How can the people have these experiences? So, I don't know. Long answer to a very deep question, but I understand the skepticism. I'm still have skeptical thoughts and myself about certain aspects of spirituality and life and being a human. But I think you know that's healthy, and hopefully will spur people on to do their own research.
Yeah, that's so refreshing because it shows that healing comes from the experience itself, not just the belief.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's sort of there's this big system of being human, of mind, body, and soul, and certainly belief is a big part of that. But also, there's so many other aspects to life that maybe we're unaware of. I think Michael Newton, in his books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, outlines it very well in terms of what happens in what I call it spirit realm or the spirit world or the soul world, what he calls life between lives, when we're just a soul and we plan out this life. Like we're making agreements, almost like we're making contracts with other people, other souls who come down to play their various parts. It's almost like a theater troupe. Say there's a theater troupe of 10 actors, and every year they do 6 different plays, and they decide what play they're going to do, what story they're going to tell, what learning these characters are going to have to go through so they get to the end of the play and be different, more improved characters, hopefully, and who's going to play what role. And then they go through that play, they have that experience, and then it ends, and then they decide, okay, what's the next one we're going to do, and who's going to play what role, and who's going to help who in terms of who's going to be the lead actor. And it's not maybe the perfect analogy, but it looks, in terms of the research that Michael Newton has done, and he passed away in 2011, but he spent the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s researching this with other people. It wasn't like he just went through 1 or 2 people and kind of guessed at what it's all about. He went through thousands upon thousands of sessions with people, asking and having them tell their remembrances, their experiences of the soul world. And the reason it's so fascinating is people have similar experiences. They were having, even though they didn't know each other, they didn't have access to any information. This is 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. There's no internet, at least that we had access to. These people hadn't read the books that were out there. Certainly there's no Brian Weiss books or some Dolores Cannon books. But this information wasn't widely known. And he was having thousands of people over the course of 30 years give similar experiences of the soul world, of the spirit realm. And that's what those books outline, is how this kind of works. And so I've sort of focused my attention on that research because it's not just one person's opinion or one person's channeled experience. It's research done over decades with thousands of people who, through their different ages, their different cultures, different ethnicities, different religions, and they all had similar experiences. And so again, when somebody's skeptical, I would say, well, then how do you explain the thousands upon thousands of people who had these experiences? Nowadays, you may be able to say, okay, well, they're being influenced by the internet, by YouTube videos, all the books that are out there. Okay, I get that. But this is back in the 1970s, back in 1980s. That information wasn't out there. Maybe in select communities, but he's working with people who did not have access to that. So why were they all having the similar experiences over, people around the country, different ages, different cultures, different life experiences? So again, it's a very fascinating thing in terms of, certainly somebody who does not believe in reincarnation or past lives, probably not going to have an experience because they're not going to believe in it. And so therefore they're not going to be open to letting go and accessing that part of mind, body, soul that'll allow this experience. It's sort of like the person who doesn't believe they can quit smoking. Well, I can't make that person quit smoking if they don't want to or if they don't believe they can. So it's really about the intention. And so if you're open to the experience, you're open to having that experience in the way that it comes to you, then I think it could be very enlightening, and very, very, very healing.
100%. So Craig Meriwether reminds us that healing doesn't just happen in the mind. It happens across lifetimes, across dimensions of soul memory. Whether you approach it with belief or simple curiosity, his work shows that the past can be a doorway to peace, clarity, and empowerment in the present. Until next time, may you stay open to the mysteries that guide your inner light.